Okay, good morning, everyone. I am really excited for this conversation. Just because top of funnel has been a huge topic. I feel like John and I were talking backstage, and I feel like the end of last year, like quarter three and four, and now it's such a hot topic, and we're seeing so many developments in tech and technology, specifically when it comes to sales development. So that's going to be our topic today is AI in sales development, prospecting, outreach, etc. And I'm really excited to have John Henson on of Henson Legal, LLC. He specializes in AI and sales. So I'm just going to flip it to you, John. You can introduce yourself, tell everyone what you do, your specialty, and how you got into it, because I think that's really interesting too.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's great. I love this topic. So, I'm a lawyer. I was in house for about 10 years, been in private practice for a couple of years now, and started my own law firm last year, focusing on lead generation and the use of AI voice in lead generation. And you and I were talking about it has been a wild year or so in that space with lots
Mhm.
going on. It is an area in which it is easy to do right because we're trying to fit the AI into the rules that were already in place. But if you're not doing it correctly, it's an easy area to get tripped up. And there's a lot of risk there. So we're trying to make sure that our clients are, if they're using AI voice, they're using it correctly. And if they offer AI voice as a service, then they're offering that in a way that helps their clients become compliant as well.
Okay, so and are you now, do you represent both the companies that produce the AI services and the organizations that are using those? Do you do both or do you specialize in one?
Yeah, my clients basically fall into two buckets, right? So lead generation clients, either buyers or sellers of leads, uh,
Hmm.
and they would use AI voice for outreach, right? And then I also have a lot of clients that are AI voice platforms, which
Hmm.
offer those lead generators or sales teams the AI voice products. So it's
Okay.
really interesting because I get to see it from both sides of
Mhm.
creating the product in a compliant way and then actually using the product in a compliant way.
Okay. And also, like we were also talking earlier about how at one point late last year, I was seeing this huge ad campaign from one AI organization that creates the AI SDRs, and they were saying, oh, the SDRs don't get tired, the sales reps, blah blah blah, they work 24/7, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden it's like poof, I don't see them anymore. Like they were literally inundating my feed, and then all of a sudden I just didn't see them anymore. I'm like, what's happening? And I think you had a similar experience at a conference, right?
Yeah, I was at a trade show last year, and there was about 30 companies that are offering some sort of AI voice. Went to the same trade show this year, and it was down to about 10. And I think you're seeing a couple of things. One, you're seeing consolidation in the market, right?
Hmm.
People that are good at it, or people that have got some funding, and they are able to offer their product at a high quality service. And then um, you're just seeing just people fall off, right? So they were offering products or services that weren't up to what the market needed or wanted, and so they fell off. I think anytime you see a new technology quickly come on the scene, you see people try to monetize it, and if they don't implement their product or service as well, like they're just not going to make it. And so I think we're starting to see some of the more maturing companies come up, and I do think that what is a positive is what I see. I work in various industries, right? Insurance,
Hmm.
mortgage, real estate, and the products that are really positioned well are those industry specific products, right? So AI voice for insurance or AI
Okay.
voice for real estate. Uh,
Hmm.
those seem to be have got a little more uh, success and coverage in the market.
And are you seeing more AI cell development in B2B or B2C, or is it kind of a mix of both?
Yeah, I would say it's a mix. I would say the B2C, my B2C clients are somewhat more hesitant about it than my direct B2B clients. I think that the B2C clients understand some of the risks that are out there a little bit better. And, or I don't want to say a little bit better. They're more concerned with those risks. And the B2B clients, they're not concerned with the risk, but they've had ways to mitigate those risks slightly better than the B2C clients do.
Okay. So along with the massive push that we're seeing with AI powered sales development in your work, what is the biggest legal risk that you're seeing that companies aren't thinking about as they are either creating these technologies or they're using them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to answer that, I got to take a step back. So the main federal rule around this is what we call the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, or the TCPA.
Mm-hmm.
The TCPA has two parts. It has the do not call section and what I call the regulated technology section. So regulated technology includes auto dialers. Like, I know that you've been in this business for years, Lee, and it's one of those things that we always hear about robo dialers, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And robo dialer is a regulated technology. Well, also in the TCPA, it states pre-recorded or artificial voice. Okay. And the FCC, which is the governing body that regulates the TCPA, has said artificial intelligence voice, AI voice, is an artificial voice.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it's a regulated technology. Okay. We can all agree on that. That seems right. But what does that mean in practice? And in practice, that means you have to have the consumer's consent to call them. Now, it could be prior express consent if it's just an informational call, like think of a termite company calling you and saying, hey, this is John, I'm an AI voice, we're coming to do your house service in an hour. Okay, that's informational. I'm not trying to sell you anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other side, you have telemarketing calls, right? Which are, they're trying to sell you something. And for that, the TCPA requires you to have prior express written consent.
Okay.
You cannot call that consumer. And when I say consumer, I mean residential phone number, right? And that could be a cell phone, that could be their house phone, either one.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't call that customer without a written authorization to call that customer for marketing.
Okay.
And if you do, it's $500. It can be up to $500 penalty per call. And if a court finds that you did that knowingly and willingly, it could be $1,500 per call.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the risk gets high quick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's only going to get faster because AI helps you dial so much. So it's not whether you're using an auto dialer. It's if you're using AI, you're using regulated technology, and therefore you have to understand what you're calling these customers about or consumers about, and based on that, what level of consent do you need?
Okay, so a couple of things that you said there, I just wanted to touch on a little bit. So you talked about calling like residential, right? So we're talking about home phones, which kind of are on their way out if they're not already out. But so most people are on their mobiles.
Yep.
So with a lot of my clients, and probably a lot of the audience clients are B2B clients, but what we're also seeing is the cell phone being used to make sales calls, which is not uncommon.
Correct.
But now we have the AI piece. So where does what you just talked about fit in to the B2B space?
Yep. No, that's a great question. And that's one we get a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem becomes, I own a small business. This is my cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
I take calls from clients. I take calls from my kids, right? Now, the problem comes if I say you called my personal cell phone and you violated the TCPA. Where this gets hard is that it's now your responsibility to show that this is not a personal phone. This is a business.
Okay.
As we all know from school, it's hard to prove a negative, right?
Mhm.
So it becomes very difficult very quickly. And, like honestly, if you're calling cell phones, you have to assume that is a residential phone number.
Okay.
And therefore, you have to have some level of consent.
Okay. So that makes complete sense. So the burden of proof is on me as the caller or the organization calling that this is not
Yeah.
the okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Um okay. Are you seeing when you're consulting with organizations or whatever, are you seeing that they understand a lot of this, or are they just completely unaware, or do they know some of it, right? Are they aware of a little bit of it, or are they just completely
Yeah. I would say my clients typically fall into two categories, right? Like,
Mhm.
I know what the rules are, help me implement them.
Okay.
Or I know there are rules. What are they? Right.
Mhm.
And so I, because I basically run a compliance practice and it's not a litigation practice,
Mhm.
they're coming to me because they know they need to be compliant. They may not know what they need to be compliant with, but they know they need to be compliant. And I think that's one of the differences. And so it's not necessarily they're coming in completely blind. They just they know what they don't know, right?
Okay. Or they know something that
Yeah,
they're like, I know there has to be something else to this, right?
exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, one of the things that you also talked about just a few minutes ago was uh, consent.
Mhm.
And you talked about having express written consent.
Yep.
So can you touch on that a little bit and, explain to everyone what that needs to look like in actual practice? Because I've heard like various iterations of this, workarounds and so forth. So can you, from a legal perspective, can you kind of explain what that entails?
Yeah, I would say very high level, right? The consumer has to say, yes, I'm okay with the company calling or texting me with some technology, right? Whether that's an auto dialer, whether that's AI voice, whether that's through text messages about a certain product and or service, right?
Mhm.
So obviously there's a little bit more nuance in that, but basically high level, I have to understand that you as the caller are going to call or text me. You may or may not use some sort of regulated technology, and I need to know what you're calling or texting me about, right?
Mhm.
Um, and we can talk a little bit about that. But like if I asked you, um, hey, I'm gonna come bring you something. Do you Are you okay with me coming to bring you something? What's your first question? What are
What
you
is it?
bringing me? Right?
Right. What is it?
Like works the same with the TCPA, right? Like
Mhm.
just to say, uh, you're okay with me calling you. No, I'm not. I'm
Mhm.
okay with you calling me about something, right? But you
Mhm.
got to tell me what. Otherwise, that's not going to be good consent, right? Because going back to the what am I bringing you? I could be bringing you a cake, or I
Mhm.
could be bringing you a puppy that you now have to take care of, and I don't want to have to take care of it, right? So
Right.
you've got to be able to understand in the consent language, the consumer, the customer has to understand what are you calling me about, right?
Mhm.
And if you don't get that basic part, then you're going to have problems with consent. Same
Mhm.
thing with uh, who is calling me, right?
Mhm.
I'm probably okay with you calling me Leah, but I may not be okay with Bob Smith down the road calling me, right? So I think that those are the kind of things that you want to think through on the consent language. Who's doing the calling? What are they calling about? And how are they calling, right? Uh,
Mhm.
Again, there's some nuances there, but high level, those are the main things we want to look at.
So when you talk about consent and you're talking about written consent, what does that look like?
Yeah, no, it has to be written. That's a great question.
Mhm.
So, what has to be written? The consent language, right? You have to be able to read the fact that I'm going to call you using this about this topic, right? Now, could that be obtained via text message? Maybe, right?
Mhm.
Could it be obtained on an internet lead form? Yep. Could it be
Mhm.
obtained on a door to door form. We see that a lot, like in home services, right? They'll go
Mm-hmm.
door to door and say, hey, is it okay if I call you about your windows later? Yes, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
great. All that's written. Could it be done over a cold call on the phone verbally? No, it cannot, right? It's not written.
Mm-hmm.
It's not written.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are there ways to get the consumer to agree to give that consent in a written manner? Yeah, there are. But like that's very specific. I mean, it needs to be very specific how you do that. So,
Okay.
but there are ways to get that. I'm just saying it's not, but verbal only is not.
Okay. Okay. So it has to be written. So obviously that brings us to the elephant in the room. But before I go there, I want to delve a little bit into if you have any insight into why regulators decided to classify AI voice in this way, right? Because obviously it's a new
Yeah,
frontier, as they say.
yeah. Well, a few reasons. One, the FCC for the last 10 years has been really concerned with scam calls and then
Mm-hmm.
the volume of scam calls.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were seeing with the rise initially of AI voice, there was also a corresponding rise with AI voice scam calls. And they wanted to clarify that, hey, you still have these rules still apply even on this new technology. The second thing is like just globally, like politicians and governments feel that they need to have an opinion on everything. And I say that somewhat jokingly, but when you have both administrations over the last few years, both the Biden administration and the Trump administration have come out very publicly and said, we want to lead in AI. And they have given their agencies, the FCC, the FTC,
Mm-hmm.
guidance to say, hey, we want you out in front of this, getting ahead of this. And so I think that's really a lot of it too, is that the regulators are like, hey, we really do need to get out ahead of this
Mm-hmm.
and show some leadership on that. So I think that's where that stems from. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that most people in the TCPA space weren't surprised when the FCC said AI voice was considered a pre-recorded or artificial voice. I mean, it's in the name, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's artificial voice, artificial intelligence voice. It's right there, right? So,
Right. Okay. So back to the elephant in the room then.
yep,
Now that we're talking about AI being used in self development, specifically when we're talking about cold calling, right? Because we're seeing a lot of this. And in fact, I've interacted with a few people on LinkedIn and they were just like, have you ever been called by AI? I have. I was cold called. It sounded terrible. I hung up.
yep,
But also, then we're also seeing where the I mean, he couldn't prove it on paper that this was AI, but it was an AI that dialed him on his phone, on his cell phone, and it hung up. It did it two times, and he called back to see who it was, and then it was a sales call,
yep.
essentially. So, with regards to the consent that we talked about, all of those things, is it really possible to do AI cold calling legally the way it needs to be and the way it's being regulated?
I would say with a true cold call, as in I've never interacted with this human being before, I'm going to call them. It is extremely difficult. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
because the fact of you using AI kicks the consent requirements into place. Um, and so it becomes very difficult. Now, are people doing it? Yes, right. Like there was late last month, there was a lawsuit against a large mortgage lender for doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Consumer picks up the phone. It says, hey, this is so and so from lender calling you back, giving you a quick call back. The consumer never called the lender, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the consumer said, okay, yeah, I'll talk to somebody. They talked to a live person who was from the lender, and that live person sent an email later, and so that consumer knew, okay, this is actually this lender doing this, and they filed a lawsuit against the lender. So yeah, no, it's an issue, and that it. I would tell everyone that if you think that you can use AI to do pure cold calls, that is a uphill climb to do compliantly.
And it's hard to, I would assume that it's hard to, if you do it, it's hard to defend it if you're called on it, or if someone.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think that, like, historically we've all said, oh, I'm going to cold call because I'm not using a robo dialer, right? Or I'm going to
Right.
manually cold call. Okay, that's fine. Like, you can do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Asterisks. that is a thing you can do. You can manually dial people, right? However, the part of the TCPA that regulates auto dialers also regulates the AI, right? And just because you're not using this over here,
right,
doesn't mean you're free if you're using this. So it's really understanding the technology you're using, really understanding what you're calling, and how you got those numbers is the key thing there.
That makes sense. That's a whole nother conversation. I mean, that makes complete sense. So yeah, I guess you could try to get the whole reason why companies don't want to do the manual calling is because obviously you can't call at scale, you can't do the volume, and so that's why most of them are trying to turn to all these AIs and workarounds.
Yeah.
Now,
but the flip side of that is, right, while companies don't want to do that because it's hard to scale and hard to do a lot of calls at once, consumers may not want that either, right?
Right.
Because they don't want to get a large volume of calls. Right? So it is a definite balancing act there for sure.
Yeah, I think, there's a balance. We can get into the ethics and, the integrity of all this kind of stuff. And we're seeing, at least I'm seeing a lot of pushback from even people in the B2B space that are getting all these calls by their cell phones, and they're frankly pissed off about it.
Yeah.
And I just worry that, and I know that that's also a concern of yours, that, people getting a hold of this AI technology are then going to use it in a way that is not good for the consumer, and we're going to dig ourselves a deeper hole as an industry.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think one of the things that frustrates me is when I have clients or people I know who are trying to do outreach correctly, right? And they get nailed by spam likely, or they're having deliverability issues. And those issues are related to essentially call quality and number reputation, right? And one of my fears is that AI calls will become so prevalent and so there'll be so many of them that it makes it harder for the people who are doing things correctly to do their jobs, right? And it's like that is a frustration and a worry of mine. So those, I mean, I say, spamming 100,000 calls a day, right? And you're just trying to call the people who have raised their hand and said, I want to talk to you, but you can't get in through the noise, right? That's a real risk we're running.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we're already seeing that to some degree, right? We're seeing a lot of, like, every day I see a post by a leader or somebody else complaining about how they got a cold call from an actual human being, and there really wasn't a whole lot wrong with it. But I think because we've done things that we shouldn't for so long, now everybody's sensitized to it, and now it's like the least little thing. So this just feels like another drop in the bucket, so to speak, that we have to hurdle, that we have to overcome.
I mean, I'm a lawyer. People hate lawyers. Like,
I'm sure.
I'm used to it, right?
Yeah. So when we're talking about, so we're talking about AI, we talked about the actual voice calls and so forth. Now, I was working with a company, and they were working on developing their top of funnel and they want to change some things up. And then they mentioned that they're experimenting or they're testing some AI SDR.
Mhm.
First thing out of my mouth was, okay, is that legal? And then like they had no answer for me and they were like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We haven't really tested it that much yet. I don't have that information. And then I'm like, are we talking about voice or SMS, which is text for those that don't know? And they were like, I think it's both. And I'm like, okay, that feels iffy to me, but okay. So I'm just wondering from a text perspective, where are we falling with regards to legality, the TCPA and all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the artificial pre-recorded voice, if I'm going to put it in that regulated technology bucket, right, only applies to voice.
Okay.
Now, I talked very briefly earlier about that. The other portion of the TCPA is the do not call portion, right? So if your phone number is on the do not call list, you cannot get, you should not receive telephone solicitations that you haven't consented to. Okay.
At all
right?
B2B or B2C.
Yep. And that includes text messages.
Okay.
So now there's also a lot going on legally right now about whether calls are text or calls. For the majority of the country, a call is a text and a text is a call for TCPA purposes.
Okay.
But so again, so in that case, you do want to scrub against the DNC list before you text them. Or you have some sort of level of consent or an exclusion to that DNC rules to make those calls or make those texts. Sorry.
Okay. So if someone had an AI agent or whatever it is, and they had a list of text numbers, say it's scrubbed against the do not call list, like you said, and they scrubbed out those numbers or whatever, are they then legally allowed to use AI to text that list?
In theory, yes.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So if you have the rule prevents telephone solicitations. Okay. So 2 numbers on the DNC list. Telephone solicitation is going to be marketing, right? If you're sending out a marketing text message and that number is not on the DNC, then you can send that out, right? As long as you've scrubbed that list. And, it's not an auto dialer or something like that. But because you can get an auto dialer text message.
Okay.
True.
Okay. So if they are using an auto dialer text message, what happens then? What are the legalities?
So if it's an auto dialer as defined under the regulated technology portion, you have to deal with both the regulated technology portion and have to have that consent, right? Either prior, expressed, or written, depending on the message. And generally speaking, if you have that consent, you're good to go on the DNC. You can ignore that, right? But if you don't have that consent and you're using an auto dialer, you still can't use it because that overrides it. It gets very complicated. Like there's whole matrices developed.
Okay, so it's not just like if they're not on the DNC and you want to blast out a bunch of SMS, you're home free. It's not like that.
Yeah, you just need to make sure you have to understand the technology you're using and whether or not it's an auto dialer or not.
Okay, so it's also the technology that's being used. So then companies also need to understand this, right?
Correct.
So is it the same as when you're using voice? Like if you do it manually, you're pretty much in the clear as long as you're not doing, you're not calling numbers on the DNC.
As long as it's not an auto dialer, that's where your real risk is on the consent.
Okay. Right? Okay. I think that bears repeating because
the risk is there's 2 risks here, right? Calling numbers on the DNC is a risk. Okay. If you scrub and they're not on the DNC, then you've eliminated essentially that DNC risk, but you still may have a regulated technology risk.
Okay.
Okay. So we really have to understand the numbers I'm calling or texting and the technology I'm using to do so. Right. And if you can go through and you can check both and make sure you're good on all those boxes, then you're good.
That's where I was getting at, because as you know, we just talked about 10 minutes ago, organizations do not want to be texting manually. They don't want to be calling manually
Right.
because of the labor burden, and it's just time consuming or whatever. But so there's no free lunch, so to speak. You still got to make sure you're covering your bases with regards to the
Yeah.
technology too.
Yep. And you want to show that. Like you want to be able to, if someone comes a calling and says, "Hey, you shouldn't have done this," you want to be able to say,
Mhm.
"These are the steps we took." Right.
Have you had companies come to you after the fact, after they like violated and they were just like, "Oh crap, we didn't know"?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't do litigation. So like
Mhm.
I can go in and say, okay, if they're getting sued, I can point them to someone who can help them with that. But then I go in and we double check to make sure their processes and procedures are correct. The good
Okay.
news is for the DNC, um, there's a safe harbor in the DNC rule that if you follow these steps, right,
Mhm.
and you can show that this call that you made was an accident or fell outside of the guidelines and we fixed it, right? Then there is a safe harbor there under the DNC portion.
Okay. So, but the companies, they have to be more diligent about covering
Sure.
their bases legally, making sure they're compliant and so forth. That's what you do, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. All right. We're coming up on time, but just to close it out, what do you see happening in the future? Do you see regulation evolving? Do you see more regulation around like SMS, like texting, so forth? Because obviously everybody now in the world is using their freaking cell phone, right? So I
Yeah.
can't imagine that's going to stay static.
Yeah. I think that what you're going to see is I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think that
Mm.
you're going to get some clarity on SMS, and that's twofold. That's regulatory clarity from the FCC.
Mhm.
I also think you're going to get some case law clarity from lawsuits because I kind of briefly mentioned it. There's a handful of uh, districts in the country that say SMS are not phone calls,
Oh,
and
really?
therefore the TCPA doesn't apply.
Mhm.
But again, that is a minority view right now.
Mhm.
However, it's a growing minority. And what happens from a legal standpoint is once you have that, we call a circuit split, right? So for example, California says they are text are calls. Texas says they're not, and the states line up on that. Then that is a type of situation which will go to the Supreme Court, and they'll get it. They'll give an answer on that. Uh,
Okay.
so anyway, that's a long way to say. I think over the next 12, 18 months, you're going to see some clarity on both sides of that. Um, I also think over the next 12 to 18 months, kind of like that lawsuit I mentioned with that lender, you're going to
Mhm.
see a lot more. You're going to see
Okay.
a lot more. That's one of the first cases to really try this out. This theory about AI voice, and it won't be the last.
How do you see it evolving from a B2B standpoint? Do you see the same thing, kind of thing, or do you think it's going to vary at all?
Yeah, I think what you see is I like to give the example of like lawsuits like the one I mentioned with the mortgage, right? It is the um, dinosaur in Jurassic Park, right?
Mhm.
They're testing the fence. Where's the fence weak, right?
Right.
And
Mhm.
once they figure that point out, they then go expand out and say, okay, I know that I can get people on this. So let me go think of who all's texting people, right? Real
Mhm.
estate companies, texting home sellers, real estate companies, texting agents to come join their company,
Mm.
insurance companies, texting insurance agents, right? SDRs calling B2B, right? So once they figure out where the weak points are, then that gets expanded out.
Okay. So it sounds like for now, at least now at least in the short term, at least in the next 18 months, like we've heard so much about, AI is replacing SDRs and what it's not going to do that because the risks are too high.
Yep. Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay. Well, it's been a really, really great conversation. Thank you, John, for
Thank
doing that. If people want to reach you and they want to ask you questions or, retain you or whatever, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
you. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. John Henson on LinkedIn. And then also my website is henson-legal.com, and you can find me there.
Awesome. And you work with both the technology sellers and the organizations that are using it.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much. And I hope this has been helpful for everyone. Please make sure your legal bases are covered. If you have any questions about compliance, you probably need to retain John. So give him a call or hit him up on LinkedIn, and we will see you later. Thank you so much. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.